In the year 2000, the leaders of the world promised to get all children into school by 2015. But today, 58 million children are still missing
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so welcome back to our lectures. Within the series of lectures I am delivering within the GIAN program. So, our lecture today is entitled Human Development. Of course, this is very related and very. Can you push it a little bit far away? It's fine. Shall I? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, I am very glad to welcome you again to our lecture. It is within a series of lectures that I am delivering entitled Human Rights and Media Tracking. So, the lecture of today is titled Human Development. I do believe that human development is part and parcel of human rights projects in general. So we cannot, for example, implement the premises of human rights project without, of course, paying attention to human development. So today we are going to shed light on what do you mean by development in the first instance. I think that we have seen already in our previous lectures, for example, we have dealt with the question of development journalism, and we have seen also how human rights, for example, have developed throughout history. So today we are going to focus on the human capital, and especially how human beings, for example, how they develop and what are the premises of this development. So we are going to just tackle this interplay between human beings and development. In the first instance, we are going to define and understand the concept of development in relationship to many domains and many fields of study. Then we are going to tackle the question of human development. Then later on, we are going to see some examples from Morocco. Well, so before even tackling the objectives of this lecture, I would like to refer you because when we talk about human development, when we talk about the living standard, for example, when we talk about the idea of the quality or life quality, for example, when we talk about economic growth, economic development, in addition to development of the values, of the virtues, for example, that we all share in our communities. We should, of course, make allusion to one of the outstanding thinkers of this economic development and human development in general. Of course, you know this scholar. Of course, he lays the foundation for understanding human development, not only in economic terms, but also he expands, of course, this understanding to freedoms and people's choices. So his theory is very fantastic and it's very relevant to the question of human rights. It's very relevant to the question of media tracking, and it's very relevant to human development in general. This person or this scholar, he is a Nobel Prize laureate, and he is Indian. His name, of course, I think that you know him, Amartya Sen. So he has published so many books about human development, and even the United Nations, for example, the project or program of the human development is very they people there, so they are very inspired by the work of Amartya Sen. So he is, as I have said, he is a Nobel Prize, of course, in economic sciences. So according to him, so this is just maybe a very fresh beginning of the that shows, of course, to what extent human development is very crucial to implementing human rights. So according to him, we live in a world of unprecedented opulence. So this is, of course, this quotation is taken from his masterpiece, magnum opus book entitled Development as Freedoms. So that was a very important book, And as I have said, even people or members of the United Nations, so of course they are very inspired by this book. We live in a world of unprecedented opulence, of a kind that would have been hard even to imagine a century or two ago. There have also been remarkable changes beyond the economic sphere. The 20th century has established democratic and participatory governance as the preeminent model of political organization. Concepts of human rights and political liberty are now very much a part of the prevailing rhetoric. People live much longer, on the average, than even before. Also, the different regions of the globe are now more closely linked than they have ever been. This is so not only in the fields of trade, commerce, and communication, but also in terms of interactive ideas and ideals. So this is something very important in Amartya Sen's work. So he underscores, of course, the importance of empowering individuals and enabling them to achieve capabilities that contribute, of course, to a meaningful, fulfilling life. So according to Amartya Sen, so human development doesn't concern just the economic growth. It's not about, for example, scientific indexes, no, but it extends to something very important. It extends to human rights, extends to political liberty, it extends also to ideals, for example, and to interactive ideas. So this is what we mean by human development, and Amartya Sen, so of course, has postulated something which is very important, is that this human development should be inclusive. It shouldn't just include, for example, just economic, scientific indexes, numbers, statistics. No, human development should concern the whole of humanity, should concern our values also, our ideas, our human rights, our humane, okay, projects. So this is something very important that by which we can, of course, begin our lecture today, because I do believe that this lecture is going to summarize all the things, for example, that I have said before in our previous lectures about human rights, about media tracking, about development journalism, about non-government organizations, for example, and their work and their job. So this today we are going like to summarize all those lectures in this one, in order to tackle this question of human development, and to what extent, of course, this theory and this development studies, to what extent it promotes, of course, human rights. So in the light of this Amartya Sen theoretical framework, we have set up these, or we're going to see this lecture. There's lecture objectives. So the first one, we're going to understand the concept of development. What do you mean by development in the first instance, and its significance worldwide? Secondly, we are going to identify the concept of human development, as I have said. So we're going to tackle the interplay between the two, to what extent they are overlapped. Analyze the role of government policies, social programs, and international partnerships in Morocco's human development initiatives. So we're going to shed more light on these issues by giving you and providing you with some examples from the Moroccan kingdom. Examine the relationship between economic growth and human development. So this is something very important, because sometimes even when we hear the concept of development in our mind, it's about economy, it's about science, it's about statistic. No, it's about numbers. No, this time it's also about the idea growth. Okay, it's not just economic growth, but it's about ideas, it's about human rights. So the first question, for example, that we should ask in this very important context is development. What's in a name? What do we mean by development? According to Amartya Sen, so today's lecture, of course, will be based on Amartya Sen's theory of development. Why? Because it is worth mentioning this scholar's masterpiece book, Development as Freedom, because this is something very important in our context. So according to him, development consists of the removal of various types of unfreedoms that leave people with little choice and little opportunity of exercising their reasoned agency. The removal of substantial unfreedoms, it is argued here, is constitutive of development. So, according to Amartya Sen, so of course, the process of improving, for example, the quality of life, economy, for example, the quality of well-being, and even people. So of course, it is very related to setting up and freedoms, because if there is no freedom, so we cannot implement anything, not just human rights projects, for example. We cannot deal with anything. So setting up freedom is something very important, and removing, of course, various types of unfreedoms. So this is something very important, because we cannot engage in innovation, in a creativity, without, of course, living and enjoying our well-being in a very healthy, free atmosphere. So with liberty, with freedom, so at that time we can, for example, of course, implement our human rights project, and we can even fulfill all our humane activities. So traditionally, development was viewed mainly in terms of economic growth, but as you see here, it is all the time measured, okay, by increased income, industrialization, national productivity sometimes. However, this modern perspective, as it is elucidated by Amartya Sen, so it is very innovative, and of course it emphasizes a more holistic approach where development, for example, includes social, political, and environmental dimensions. So I think that we have already tackled these issues deeply when we talked about environmental protection, climate change, for example, and so many other social, cultural, political issues. So development here aims not only for economic growth but also for social equality. So this is also something that is constitutive of development. So development here also, it is about the development in the educational sphere, development in healthcare, development in human rights, development in sustainable resources management. So all these things, so this is what's new, in fact, about Amartya Sen's theory, and later on I will give you the source if you would like to get deeper into, of course, his theory, because this is something very important, because especially when dealing with media tracking and of course, human rights. Another, okay, so development, what is in a name. So according to Sen, development can be seen, it is argued here, as a process of expanding the real freedoms that people enjoy. So it's all the time this scholar emphasizes, this philosopher, because he is a philosopher, a specialist in economic development. So he emphasizes this, of course, question of relating and affiliating freedom with development. You cannot reach full development either in your society, in your social issues, environmental issues, political issues, educational issues, for example, without, of course, relating that development to freedom, without making people, of course, without making them have access to freedom. So freedom, this is something very important, of course, in establishing what we call development. Focusing on human freedoms contrasts with narrower views of development, such as identifying development with the growth of gross national product, or with the rise in personal income, so as you see, or with industrialization, or with technological advance, or with social modernization. So development requires the removal of major sources of unfreedom. Poverty, for example, as well as tyranny, poor economic opportunities, as well as systematic social deprivation, neglect of public facilities, as well as intolerance or overactivity of repressive states. So you see here, this is something very significant and very symbolic. What Amartya Sen is saying here is that we cannot reach development, for example, and with while, for example, there is this sources of unfreedom. Why? When you have poverty, for example, when you have tyranny, when you have like human rights abuse, so of course we cannot reach development at all. So in order to reach development, so and I mean here by development, it's the same, I align with the argument of Amartya Sen. So if you would like to reach full, as I have inclusive, full development, so of course you should finalize with those issues of poverty, tyranny, dictatorship, for example, all sorts of systematic social deprivation, destitution, for example, human rights abuse, and many others. So this is the first step, of course, to have full development. You should create a very healthy atmosphere where all peoples, for example, in their communities can enjoy a very peaceful life, a very free atmosphere, a very healthy atmosphere, when they can, of course, perform their jobs very well, because you cannot create under pressure. It's impossible. So you should, if you would like to contribute to the well-being of your or to the welfare of your communities, for example, so you should enjoy in the first instance your freedom. So this is something very, very important that is postulated in this masterpiece book, okay, that is entitled Development as Freedoms. Another global perspective, of course, that attempts to define and facilitates our understanding of human development. I have told you from the very beginning that we are going to see development in the first instance, and then we are going to relate it to human development. And of course, when we talk about human development, we cannot ignore the efforts, of course, delivered by the United Nations. So, according to the United Nations, so it of course introduces us to something which is very important. This is global. Is the global perspective of human development. So human development is about expanding the richness of human life rather than simply the richness of the economy. So you see here, it's again the same idea. So human development focuses on expanding people's freedoms and opportunities while improving at the same time their quality life or their quality of life. So this is something very important. It includes what? It includes enhancing access to education, healthcare, income, and participation in society. So this is something very, very important. So the United Nations sometimes development program, this is a key reference in the field of human development that you can even consult later on if you would like to delve into these ideas of human development. So it offers the United Nations, for example, website. If you go to this website, so you will find that this is a key reference. Why? Because this organization, of course, offers many data analysis, for example, insights on global progress in health, education, climate change, environmental issues, for example, and at the same time, essential components of development. So you see here, it focuses on people and their opportunities and choices. So this is human development, is creating to people within their communities opportunities, and letting them, of course, making or make their own choices. So this is also something very important. So here it lies, of course, the concept of freedom. If you don't enjoy freedom, and we have talked about it while dealing with human rights, so you should, of course, be endowed with freedom in order, of course, to participate in your society, in order to contribute to your communities, and in order to be very active citizens. So you cannot perform your citizenship, your active citizenship, without, of course, enjoying your freedom. So freedom, this is the first maybe step in order to reach this what we call human development. So this is something very important that is delivered by the United Nations Development Program. and it provides us with a global perspective wherever you go, and whoever you are, for example, whatever you are, regardless of your sex, of your gender, of your color, for example, of your nationality. So this human development, of course, is very related to you and to all people, all individuals all over the globe. So this is a human development from a global perspective. And as I have said, we have today another perception of human development. It transcends, of course, our notion of economic development to our ideas, to our opportunities, to choices, for example, and to the quality of life, either at the level of our society, at the level of politics, at the level of education, and at all levels. So it's not just about economy, but it's the humane development, it's the life quality development, it's your ideas development, your creativity development. So this is something very, very important within that we can, for example, dig, because it's very important within the framework of human rights. Uh, Another definition. So this is another thing that is, of course, delivered by the United Nations development program. So this is the Human Development Index, and if you consult the website of this organization, so you can find many reports, annual reports. Sometimes you will find them about measuring, okay, the development programs to assess what to assess all the countries overall achievement in three key areas of human development. It's about health, it's about education, it's about standard living. So as I have said, if you would like to dig into these questions, so please go and read Amartya Sen's books, because they are very wonderful, very relevant within the context of this question of the standard of living, within this question of development as freedom. So this is something very important. So United Nations, of course, so sometimes it even examines life expectancy, educational attainment, gross national income, for example. Sometimes even it controls, it examines to what extent, for example, this question of health, education, and standard of living is very are very progressed, for example, in countries all over the world. So this is about human development, as I have said in the very beginning. So we are going to tackle so many examples, especially from the Kingdom of Morocco, to be more illustrative and see this question of human development, the strategies, how we can reach, of course, this human development. And I'm going to shed light on Moroccan, of course, strategies that have been, of course, implemented in order to promote human beings welfare. So this is that these issues, of course, they are preponderant. Why? Because you cannot, as I have said, you cannot exercise, you cannot implement human rights principles, human rights premises, without, of course, paying more attention to human development. So this is something very important, and I think that all countries all over the world, so they are, of course, very engaged. Why? Because if you would like to promote your country, so of course your country should have a very pertinent, tangible, palpable strategy, a very palpable plan. And that plan, of course, it should consider this human development issue, because this is something very, very important nowadays. Especially we have so many unfortunately speaking, we have so many crises, we have so many issues, many sometimes we do still have destitution, we still have poverty, we still have this question of environmental crisis, we still have pollution all over the globe, we still have water scarcity. So we have many rising up to date sometimes issues. And in order to of course to find very effective resolutions and solutions to those issues. So I told you in the previous lectures that sometimes, and this is the global perspective of human development, sometimes we have global issues, global problems, and we should find global solutions. So this is at the level of this global perspective, and this is sometimes this is something very very crucial that should be part and parcel of our countries, of course, strategies, either for example short-term strategies or even long-term strategies. We have already spoken about the efficient role that non-government organizations, for example, play in promoting human development, in taking care of people, for example, people with disabilities, vulnerable people in our society, also gender inequality, and so many other rising up issues, unfortunately speaking. Now we are going to see this concretization of human development by studying some examples from the Kingdom of Morocco. So this is the map. So we are going to deal with the human development in Morocco in order to, of course, question and interrogate to what extent or what are the strategies that Morocco, for example, has implemented in order to promote so many sectors of course, that are very related to human development. So Morocco really has made strides in this question of human development, and this journey, it's a long journey. It's not, of course, a short one. It's a long journey of strategies, of plans, and really, as we are going to see, it has made really notable progress over the past few decades because of many human development initiatives, okay, that focus on issues of healthcare, education, social promotion, for example, social protection, economic growth, and many others. So even the government, the Moroccan government, of course, has initiated, of course, many programs like the new human development model, for example. This is something very important. And another program, it's the NDH program, okay. It's the National Initiative for Human Development. Even if you can later on maybe consult the website of the United Nations, okay. You can find that report about the human development initiative in Morocco. So that initiative, or all those strategies, they have, of course, one purpose: to reduce destitution, to reduce poverty, and to promote social inclusion, to take care of people with disabilities, to take care of vulnerable people in our society. And I think that we have already introduced or get introduced to many videos that of course elucidate to what extent this human development is part and parcel of Morocco's strategy in general. So we are going to see concretely, because we need some examples to know what do we mean by human development. This is an up-to-date, of course, theory inspired by Amartya Sen. So we are going to see this cultural development, social development, economic development, political development, educational development, even architecture development. So we're going to assess and evaluate these, of course, or this human development project in Morocco, because we need something, okay, that we can so that we can illustrate what do you mean by human development concretely. And of course, I think that I cannot speak about any country except my own, and I feel very comfortable because I know my country and I know all the strategies that my country has undergone in order to promote human development. If we have time, maybe we can exchange ideas about your Indian government, for example, human development project. Why not? Well, So as I have said, we are going to see all the manifestations of this, of course, development, and we are going to see to what extent Morocco, of course, is taking care of this because it has this global, of course, perspective, and it would like to be among the knowledge, of course, based, the global knowledge based economy. At the same time, it is an ambitious country that of course would like to be a part, okay, or within the human development project all over the world. So let's see some examples. So this is a political development, and it is very manifested in in the constitutional reform that took place in 2011, and that was really a landmark in the history of Morocco. Why? Because this constitution, of course, it increased political transparency, accountability, and at the same time citizen participation within in the political sphere, and this is something very important, and it was a reform indeed, okay, during the Arab Spring, and it was very efficient because it suggests, of course, the powers of the parliament and the judiciary, and gave, of course, citizens greater rules in political processes at all. So here it's this is what we call the inclusive political development, or political human development, if you would like. So this is a landmark, this constitution. Also there is another strategy, is decentralization. Sometimes even we call it advanced decentralization and regionalization. What does it mean? It means distributing power all over cities in Morocco, all over, of course, it's like you in India, you have states. In Morocco, we don't have states, but we have regions, and each region, of course, is very responsible of what's going on within its community. So this is it, it's distributing political power more evenly across the whole country. So this centralization, of course, it promotes local governance, and this is something very important, of course, in the democratic project and in human development project in general. So this political development is part and parcel of that umbrella. It's an umbrella term of human development. So this is something very important. Why? Because the decision, either in order not to have this monopolization of decision, for example, making, so we have this decentralization across the country in order to have this local governance. Strengthening civil society organizations, so this is something very important, and I talked about it in the even the previous lectures. So and now you know the pivotal role of non-government organizations in advocating for human rights. So of course, if the country strengthens those organizations, so this is for a purpose, and the purpose is to advocate for human rights in the community. So of course, Morocco has supported this growth of human rights, for example, organizations, sometimes even environmental organizations, that women's empowerment organization also. So there are a lot, for example, of issues that those organizations tackle, and of course the strategy of the country is encouraging, of course, those strategies in order to foster a more active civil society, a more active civil citizen. As I have said, this is something which is very important in human development. It's to have active civil citizenship. This is something very important. So, because we cannot progress, we cannot develop with passive citizens, with careless citizens. It's impossible. So sometimes even the country should invest in the human capital, because some even, for example, if you read the previous reports by the United Nations, so you will find that they invest on the human capital, and sometimes the believe me, sometimes the most powerful power in the country is the human capital. This is the most powerful thing. If the human capital is well educated, is very aware, is very conscious of the rights, is very active, so of course you will reach all those political, for example, development goals. So this is something very important that we should all work on in order to have an inclusive or reach an inclusive society. So these are, of course, as I have said, the manifestations of the political development, which is part of the umbrella term human development. Another example, so let's tackle, this is the economic development. As I have said, sometimes when we think about human development, we just think about economy. Yes, economy is part, but among many other issues that we should take into consideration. So these are some strategies, for example, that the Moroccan kingdom has taken into consideration in order to promote human development. Renewable energy initiative. So I think even we saw this in our lecture on the right to environment. So Morocco really is a global leader when it concerns this renewable energy development. So this is something very important, especially in establishing the solar energy and the wind energy. So like the examples I provided in the previous lecture in Warzazat, so students who attended those previous sessions, so they know what I am talking about. Industrial acceleration plan also. So this is launched in 2014. So that was a plan. Of course, it aimed to diversify Morocco's industries in order, of course, for one purpose, which is, of course, human development manifested in economic development. Also, there is this question of tourism and hospitality. So tourism, you know that Morocco is a tourist resort by excellence, and this tourism is taken by the Moroccan kingdom as an industry, as an economy also, and as an economic driver also. Why? And this strategy, of course, was manifested in promoting like historical cities, in refining like old cities, for example, refining all the historical monuments, promoting even old cities, old medinas, what we call in Arabic old medinas. And this is one example of this strategy is the Vision 2020. So that was an initiative, of course, that attracted 20 million tourists annually. And you see this strategy, of course, of paying attention, promoting tourism and hospitality in Morocco. So this is a strategy among many others to promote economic development, and at the same time, when you promote economic development, you reach human development, because this is something very, very important to reach a prosperous, for example, a country. So you should pay attention to all the sources that you have in your community. Either you have human sources, you should invest in your human sources. You have natural sources, you should invest in those natural resources. So it depends. So the country, of course, should work with this strategy in order, of course, to exercise the premises of what we mean by human development. Higher educational development, also this is part and parcel of human development. This is something, according to Malcolm X, education is the passport to a better future. So we cannot reach a better future, we cannot reach active citizenship without, of course, implementing a very effective educational strategy in our countries. And this is something very important. So education also was part and parcel of this human development project in Morocco. So Morocco, you see, we do have like public and private university expansion across Morocco. We have many universities, and they some of them, so they have this high ranking all over the world, like the university in which I teach, Qadiayad University. And there are also private universities, and there are private half private and half public, like Al Akhawain University in France city, for example. There is also the Polytechnic University of Mohammed VI. There is also the International University in Rabat, the American University in Rabat. So there are so many universities, and some of them they are public, some of them are private. But anyway, so this expansion of universities, this is for, of course, establishing this project or this strategy of human development. Partnerships with international institutions. So this is it's part and parcel of all our universities in Morocco. So we collaborate with, of course, universities, international institutions. We do have many scholarships, for example. We collaborate with French institutions, with American institutions, with the European Union institutions. We have like Erasmus scholarships, for example, the Fulbright scholarship for our students. And sometimes we collaborate with Asian universities. So this is also part of and parcel of this educational development. Why? Because we do believe that we can reach our aims and objectives via exercising what we call mobility exchanges, cultural exchanges, in order to gain this global expertise. Either, for example, global expertise for professors, staff, or even for our students. So this is also something which is very important. We do have also technical and vocational educational and training. So this is also, we have many there are many institutions, for example, that offer courses aligned with the needs of key industries, for example, such as agriculture, sometimes like mining, for example, like in some industries. And this is also, it helps to reduce unemployment, because sometimes even students couldn't pursue their academic, for example, careers, so they can deviate and they will find a space where they can perform their creativity. And this is something that, of course, they can go to this vocational sort of education and training. Because sometimes even you may have talented people in academia, but at the same time you may have talented creative people in those educational institutions, or in those vocational institutions. So this is also part of promoting, part and parcel of Morocco's strategy to promote this human development premise. Yes. Media development also. So I think that this is very related to our thematic of these lectures, human rights and media tracking, and we have really tackled this issue. But let's see how Morocco, for example, has developed this issue. So it's via television, radio channels. In fact, we have so many television networks. For example, we have SNRT. We have also what we call Deuxième. We do have the Sport TV, Riyadiyya, and some other private channels. We do have also Media TV, and many other local, of course, channels like you here in India. Print media also, there are many Moroccan accredited journals, newspapers. They of course they collaborate, of course, with many organizations in order to share public opinion discussing local national issues. Also digital media. So nowadays, as in everywhere. So also in Morocco, we just find this expansion of internet access that has led to a surge in digital media outlets. So we find like Express. This is like an online digital newspaper. We find Dia Biladi also. This is of course a newspaper, online newspaper. So these platforms, so these are digital platforms. In addition, of course, to the platform that you are familiar with, like Instagram and Facebook and many other youth generation or younger generation platform. And in Morocco, what you should know is that we do have television channels or print media or even digital newspapers in three languages, sometimes even in four languages. So in Arabic, some in French, in English, and sometimes even in Amazigh language. So these are our constitutional, of course, official languages. Of course, it's Arabic, Amazigh language, but we do have also the second language, French. Then the foreign language is English, and most of the time we find also like television programs in Spanish, also in the Spanish language. So we have like a variety of languages, a variety of cultural aspects. But the country also has, of course, promoted this question and has paid more attention to media development because it knows to what extent media development nowadays is very important in raising the consciousness of the communities and sharing public opinion, and at the same time tackling many specific issues, many like sensitive issues. So the role of media is very important, and we have already talked about development journalism, and we have seen to what extent they are very crucial to our societies. Social development. This is also something that is very palpable and tangible in Morocco's strategy. We do have this national initiative for human development. This is a comprehensive social program. It's aimed at reducing poverty, promoting social inclusion, taking care of the younger generation, for example, supporting children, also the most vulnerable segment in our society, taking care of disempowered people, misrepresented people, underrepresented people, for example, marginalized rural people. So this of course it takes consideration, and it considers, of course, all this national initiative. Really, it is very comprehensive, and it governs all the most important issues, for example, that our country, of course, aims to go beyond. Well, so there is also women's empowerment strategy. So this is also part and parcel of the social development. Of course, when we talk about development, human development, within it we talk about women's development. So this is something very automatic, very arbitrary. It isn't separated at all. So Morocco has made also significant strides in promoting, of course, in social development, and especially in promoting women's status quo. There are many organizations, of course, that take care of women, especially marginalized women in rural areas. This Ramed also, this is something very important. It provides health insurance coverage for low-income Moroccans. It makes healthcare more accessible, especially to vulnerable, poor, destituted people. So this is also something very important. And Rami, this is a very efficient program that really paved the way for promoting, of course, the situation of the poor population. So this is something very very important. cultural development also. So Morocco also has undertaken many strategies because this is part of the human development. So you see from these examples, and this is my purpose. It's not just to introduce the strategies or that Morocco has undertaken, but to illustrate to you how or the nature of human development. How should it be? So it should be like this. It should be very inclusive. It should include like economic, political, educational, environmental issues, architecture issues, also then cultural issues. So it's about not just numbers, but it's about mentality development. It's about idea development. It's about ideals development. So it's about the quality of life in general that gathers all these elements in an inclusive way without any separation. So again, you see this is part of the umbrella term human development. So the cultural development. So Morocco also has undertaken several projects to preserve, of course, its cultural heritage. So you see here, including the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, like for example the historic Medinas of Fez, Marrakesh, Meknes also. So the Moroccan government, along with international organizations, so has funded the restoration of historic sites and traditional cities, arts and crafts. So this is part of Morocco's strategy to promote, of course, its cultural heritage. This is something very very important because we do have like mini historical cities, and this reviving project, this is also within the umbrella term of human development. There is also a national festival. Sometimes even we do organize international festivals. Morocco hosts numerous cultural festivals that showcase, of course, its diverse heritage, such as the Fez Festival of World Sacred Music, Sofi Music, the Marrakesh International Film Festival, Mawazin Festival also in Rabat, Ahwash Festival in Ouarzazate. So these events, for example, they promote Moroccan culture. We have also Hassani festivals in Laayoune and in our southern, for example, cities. So in many cities across Morocco, so you find those festivals, and they have, of course, they have purpose. They are not just arbitrary, but they have the purpose of promoting the cultural heritage, promoting, of course, Moroccan cultural identity. So this is also something that is within human development. If you don't hold an identity, so you will become just fluid. So I told you from the very beginning, so human development, it's about promoting active citizens. And active citizens, so the first thing they should know is their identity, their place in their community. Then, of course, they can embrace that global vision. So this is something very, very important, and this is part and parcel of Morocco's strategy. As I have said, it's the INDH. So this is something very important. Also, support for traditional art. So Morocco is very famous of traditional art in many domains, in architecture, for example, even in weaving, in pottery, in metalwork, for example. So this is also a strategy, and we have programs like Maison de l'Artisan. It's the house of craftsmanship. So this is a program that was initiated, of course, by the Moroccan Kingdom in order to promote and to support for this traditional art. Sometimes even there are many like platforms that of course expose and introduce those, for example, arts product in many markets sometimes. Okay. Well, so now let's see also architecture development. So as I have said, this human development, it is very inclusive, and it includes all the aspects that you can imagine in your society. And this is something why we should pay attention to this human development. Nowadays, even we talk about human development and like digital generations. So this is also something very important, and that will be, of course, the topic, and that the United Nations, for example, is going to tackle in 2025. So it's now they are just preparing the report for 2025, and it will be about human development and digital information, for example, and how people, for example, adapt or should be adapted to digital information and digital media especially. These are, of course, uprising issues, and we should, of course, be very we should take care of those issues, and we should look for resolutions to them. Okay, architecture development again is part of that human development project. In Morocco, we have traditional architecture, a fantastic, amazing. Like we have courtyard, we have riads, like in Fez, in Marrakesh. We have homes. They are often centered around the courtyard, with gardens sometimes, like the riad. And really, they are very big, too large. We have decorative details like zillij, we call it tiles. Okay, they are carved, sometimes stucco, geometric like designs. So either in public or private buildings. So this, of course, it shows Morocco's cultural heritage, as the photo that I showed you in the very beginning, if with the map of Morocco. So it's the Hassan's second mosque in Casablanca, and if you see that mosque, it speaks out Moroccan traditional art and Moroccan decorative details, Moroccan traditional architecture by excellence. Contemporary urban architecture, as any country all over the world, we have traditional architecture, and we have the contemporary urban architecture. So this is it's in major cities like Casablanca, Rabat, Marrakesh, for example. So they have experienced this rapid, okay, urban expansion. Like we have commercial neighborhood, for example, or commercial centers, sometimes many blocks of flat, many buildings, and so on and so forth. Um, Also, modern like modern housing development. Also, this is also very, it's very familiar in many countries. So because of this crowded population, the increase in population, so we have this modern housing development. But anyway, Morocco still, of course, preserves its traditional, cultural, of course, heritage in all domains, not just in architecture, but in all sectors. So you see now what, for example, Armatya Sin postulated concerning human development as freedoms, and what the United Nations global vision or global perspective, for example, what they have all postulated concerning the issue, because it does matter. It does matter to know and to recognize the premises of human development, especially when we talk within the framework of human rights and media tracking. As I have said, this human development shouldn't consider just economic growth, but it should expand to other cultural, architecture, educational, political, social spheres, in order to have an inclusive human development, of course, life, and in order to advocate for not just for life, but for the quality of life. So this is what matters. It's the quality of life. Sometimes, yes, we all enjoy the right to life, but we should question and interrogate what kind of life we do enjoy in our communities. So this human development, of course, project, so it advocates for having that quality of life. So this is something very, very important. As a conclusion, it's a quotation by Amartya Sen. So I told you from the very beginning that our lecture is based on that master, on Amartya Sen's magnum opus book, Development as Freedoms. So economic growth without investment in human development is unsustainable and unethical. So you cannot even achieve, this is very significant, we cannot achieve economic growth. So because I know that all countries, so they aspire to have a very good standard in economy. That this is their right, it's fine, but of course it shouldn't be to the detriment of people, of human development. It shouldn't be to the detriment of human beings freedom, no. So any human development that doesn't take into consideration, of course, ethical issues, sustainable development, so of course we cannot, it cannot reach its goals and its aims. So economic growth without this question of without this ethical question, without taking into consideration people's human mind, for example, people's ideas, people's ideals also, so it will be just unsustainable and unethical. These are the references for students who would like to dig into these questions later on. Thank you for your attention. Sorry?
Am I audible enough?
Yes, yes, okay.
So, in your slide, you discussed about the women empowerment in as per constitutional norms in your country. So, I would be, I'm actually want to know that what about the LGBTQI plus groups and whether their rights have been, acknowledged as per your constitution, and what are their struggles in your country? Okay, so I want to know that as per your talk discussed about women groups and their empowerment, but I am especially interested to know in your country the LGBTQIA plus groups, their rights, and are their rights has been acknowledged in your country, or what? I mean, where are they in terms of their political
Okay,
movement?
okay. So what I can say about women is empowerment is that they have made really significant strides. Why? Because there are many, and even the country is allowing this progress, and it is part of our constitution. First of all, so the constitution has guaranteed women's rights, and it has the country also has accelerated and strengthened, of course, non-government organizations, especially women's non-government organizations that of course tackle the question of gender equality. So, and there are many refinements in many laws, okay, that concern of course women. So I think that nowadays, so we can talk about that we do have women's empowerment, we do have women's rights, and this is very palpable in many non-government organizations, okay. So women also have their say, so we will have so many women ministers in our government. This is also a proof that women of course are leaders in the kingdom of Morocco. They participate in many spheres, for example, so you find them in the government, you find them in the parliament, for example. So they participate in the decision making of their society, of their society, and at the same time they participate in the economic sphere, in the cultural sphere, the educational sphere. So you find them everywhere. So we can. So me, as for example, a professor specialized in gender studies, so I can say that really, so our country so has made new strides in this question of women's empowerment, and there are
Okay.
indeed many strategies.
My question was about the LGBTQIA plus group. Um,
LGBT.
yeah, LGBTQIA plus. Yes.
Okay, there is really I'm not aware of this at all, but when women, for example, they aspire to have, for example, they fight for their rights. So it's general. So they would like to just exercise so some priorities, because it depends on the country's priority. So that, I think that this is not until now, it's not a priority
Not the
for.
gay right, ma'am. I'm talking discuss. I'm asking about the gay rights.
Yes, we don't have now. I tell you that we haven't had the chance to tackle these issues yet. Maybe in the future.
Okay. Also, as per refugee concern, because you share, I think, border with Algeria and you share border with Portugal, and not exactly you share border with Portugal, but it's like there are lots of refugee concern in Portugal and Spain about the Moroccan refugees, especially one of the things. So, what is your take on the Moroccan refugees um, in the immigration, especially in to Spain and Portugal?
Okay, so I think that the country has made many measures, and now we cannot talk about this question of immigration. It's not very palpable as it was before, because nowadays, as you have seen in this human development, so people just they are getting very satisfied with their situation. So even the number of immigrants, so they have become very reduced and very they decreased, especially in these new decades. Yes, you
So
have.
there's something about it's a
Yes,
general
yes,
question.
sure, sure.
Yeah, general question thing actually. So as far as I remember, there's a region called Western Sahara, right? Western Sahara, and it has
It's not
uh,
it's not called Western Sahara. I'm sorry, it's Moroccan Sahara.
okay. So at least for us, that's how we read. Western Sahara has been a disputed region between Morocco and Sahwabi Arabic
Yes, but
Democratic
yeah,
sorry,
okay,
something,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I have no understanding about the area. So I just wanted to know what is it about and what is it.
I will tell you just one sentence. It is about Moroccan Sahara. That's it. So, and I'm not specialized in politics to talk about it, because I am a professor and I'm specialized in academia. So I cannot answer your question, but just I will rectify your question. It's Moroccan Sahara and not Western. Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
You can take some break.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our lectures. I think this is not working. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, let's continue our lectures within the series of lecture I am delivering concerning human rights and media tracking. So today we are going to tackle human rights in writing and reporting. So I think that now you do have many ideas about the interplay between human rights and non-government organizations, and at the same time the interplay between media, human rights and media advocacy. We tackled also so many issues. Okay, so I hope that you are not fed up with this question of human rights. Today we are going to see some standard ethical standards, for example, that concern human rights, especially in writing and reporting, and what are the elements, the premises that we should, principles, standards that we should take into consideration while reporting on human rights. I know that we have seen this formally speaking via development journalism, via media advocacy, via the role of non-government organizations, for example. But today, so we will talk about just if you are in the process, remember the will plan that we talked about yesterday. Now, if you have finished that process of writing, reporting on human rights, so what is the thing, for example, that you should take into consideration, like the thing that we did mention before, self-evaluation. So, therefore, this lecture intends to reach these objectives and goals. So, number one is to explore ethical standards in human rights reporting, to analyze real world examples of reporting on human rights issues and their impact, to examine the challenges journalists face when covering human rights topics, and to discuss some strategies for sensitive, accurate, and impactful human rights storytelling. So this is something very important in human rights, because it helps, of course, human rights being published, being known, and being, of course, disseminated, being spread. And this is the role of reporting and writing. So we have already talked about the role of development journalism in, of course, legitimizing, in disseminating human rights issues, human rights abuses, also women's rights abuses, and so on and so forth. Now, today, so we are going to see these objectives, and we are going to make allusion to United Nations Development Program. So, according to the United Nations, reporting is an essential element of the human rights monitoring cycle, and a fundamental part of the field's present human rights work and strategy. So, human rights reports constitute a primary tool to record and analyze information, present findings of monitoring and fact-finding activities, express concern about human rights, a human rights problem, engage in dialogue and advocate with authorities, and propose recommendations for corrective action. So this is grosso modo the general elements that a report, for example, on human rights, or a writing, or a story on human rights, that should take into consideration. So it is this reporting is very essential to human rights. Why? Because without reporting, so we cannot know about human rights abuses, for example, or even we cannot know about human rights promotion. So this is something very important, and human rights reports should be should constitute a primary tool to record and analyze. So it records, so these are like the strategies. So it records, it analyzes information, sometimes it presents finding, and it deals also with proposing recommendations and solutions. So I think that we talked yesterday, and I was very clear in defining to you that the will plan. So how to come up with a very efficient, a very effective report on human rights, or even on maybe up-to-date issues that your community, for example, is suffering from, or is so this is what, how the United States, for example, defines the United Nations define the reporting. So these are some ethical standards that the reporters, for example, should take into consideration and should bear in their mind while reporting. So the first one is accuracy and objectivity. So it does mean that ensuring facts should be correct, and it should provide balanced perspectives to avoid sensationalism. So this is something very important in human rights reports. So they should be very accurate, very precise, very concise, and at the same time very objective and very neutral, and beyond of course any bias, beyond any prejudgment, beyond any prejudice. So this is the first thing that human rights reporting, for example, should take into consideration. Respect for dignity and privacy. So this is also one of the ethical standards in human rights reporting. It means respecting the humanity of individuals, particularly victims and survivors who may be affected by how their stories are portrayed. So we do know that those reporters, for example, those journalists, so they have a very noble mission in reporting, in taking risks, for example, to analyze, to report on issues, on human rights abuses and human rights issues in general. But at the same time, we do know that they face this challenge, and we talked already about this challenge. So they face the challenge of respecting the humanity of the individuals. Sometimes even they face this challenge of portraying, depicting, taking pictures of survivors, for example, like war survivors, sometimes even people with disabilities. So it's very hard sometimes to deal with these issues. So they should of course respect that dignity while reporting. They should respect the privacy of people while reporting. Of course, they should have that skill. They should use a very skillful strategy, of course, to report. And this is something that is very familiar to skillful, of course, journalists, especially development journalism. Avoiding harm, also, this is one of the ethical standards. So journalists should minimize potential harm to sources, such as retaliation or stigma, by anonymizing identities where needed. So this is something also very important. So these reports shouldn't harm people, and shouldn't, of course, undermine people or underestimate people. So while reporting, so we should, of course, respect the privacy, be very objective, respect dignity. We have talked about, maybe in the first lecture, we highlighted the fact that one of the major things that surrounds, of course, human rights is establishing human dignity. And of course, the role of development journalism, or the role even of reporting on human rights, is to establish that dignity, not to disrespect that dignity. So this is the first thing. It's to establish dignity, to promote dignity. So this is something very, very crucial to human rights reporting. Transparency, so this is very needed, being transparent about reporting methods, especially when covering sensitive or controversial topics. So we should be very, very objective, very transparent also, and we should be very sincere in order to build trust. And this is something very important in the reporting on human rights. So you should build trust with your community, for example, or with peoples all over the world. So transparency, this is one of the ethical standards in human rights reporting, and it is very demanded. Now we will go to strategies for sensitive reporting. So as I have said, so reporting it's not an easy task, but it's a crucial task to report on human rights. So this is something very important, but it's not an easy task. So journalists, for example, reporters, so they should adapt many strategies or be adapted to many strategies, rather many skillful, effective, impactful strategies in order to, of course, provide their communities and provide people with a truthful information beyond any subjectivity or bias. So building trust with sources. So this is something very important. Establishing trust is essential, particularly with individuals in vulnerable situations. So sometimes, because sometimes reporters, so they interview people. So before interviewing people, so they should build that trust, and they should be adapted to those people. They should respect them in the first instance, and they should know how to get information from them, without, of course, without touching their human dignity. So this is something very important. So they should take into consideration their vulnerable situation. This often involves spending time listening and letting sources share their stories at their own space or pace. So this is something very important. So they should listen very carefully, and they should interpret what those people, for example, are saying in a very tentative way, because this is something also very pivotal and very essential. So this is how they can build trust with their sources, be they, for example, because sources, they are very different. Maybe people, they will be sources, maybe students, maybe books also, information, media advocacy platforms, digital media outlets, and so on and so forth. So many, because those reporters, so they get information from different sources. So they should, of course, take this into consideration. Anonymity and confidentiality. So this is also something very important. So journalists must understand the importance of confidentiality agreements and ethical responsibility to protect the identity of sources. This is very crucial, because sometimes, if, especially I'm talking here about development journalists, for example, so this is their mission, or media advocacy, for example, journalists, so this is their mission. So they should understand this importance of confidentiality, this importance of ethical responsibility, in order to report on human rights in a very neutral, objective way. Their language, or the language within the report, for example, should be very clear, avoiding technical or legal jargons that makes, of course, uh, reports accessible and are more widely understood. So this is something very important. Sometimes if the language is not clear, so you cannot transmit your message in a very tangible way. So the language should be very palpable, very clear, a clear cut language that, of course, makes it very easy to access the people, and to access the viewers or the listeners, for example, or even the members of your community, your spectators. Yes, so this is something very important in the report, in the writing of the report. So the language should be very simple and very clear at the same time. Culturally sensitive language, so using culturally appropriate terms and avoiding stereotypes or biases that could misrepresent the communities involved. This is something very important, especially when someone is reporting on a culture or on a community that he or she doesn't know. Or sometimes those, for example, reported, they should pay attention to the question of gender. Sometimes they just write their report on he, and they forget about he or she, for example. And the article is rendered very biased or very gender biased. So those biases, so people who take care of this reporting mission, they should pay attention to this question of stereotypical. Maybe they will, if this is a challenge indeed, because this is stereotypical, for example, issue. but they should pay attention to it while writing or while handling, of course, their reports. So in order not to misrepresent people, because their job is to represent people in a very adequate way, not to fall in the trap or again of misrepresentation or underrepresentation. Okay, because their mission is the opposite, is to represent people adequately in an objective way, in a neutral way, not to misrepresent people or to fall in that trap. Well, so at the same time, if they respect those strategies, for example, there are so many other strategies. Okay, so this is just these are the most important ones that reporters, for example, can use, or that this is what you can find in the writing, human rights writing and reporting. Um, Also, there is something that they should consider is writing for impact, and they should consider the storytelling techniques. Many reporters, for example, and many like development journalists, so when they write about, many journalists indeed, when they write about human rights abuses, so sometimes they narrate a story. They talk about like stories that happened maybe a month ago or a week ago or just yesterday. So it's a sort of storytelling, but it's a story that is full of significances, that is full of symbols, and it's almost it's a story that has a meaning. It's very meaningful, and it has a symbolic, like a human right symbolic dimension. So it's not just a story for entertainment, but it has a meaning. It entails in its fold a meaning, and that meaning, of course, in order to be disseminated in a very good way, very skillful way, so those reporters should consider those techniques. So, personal narrative using first-hand account from victims or survivors makes issues more relatable and impactful. So this is something very important that they should use in order to impact their society. Because what is the purpose behind even development journalism, behind media advocacy, is to advocate for human rights, to advocate for development, for again for human development, to advocate for progress, for having a prosperous, for example, community, a prosperous country. So they should have an impact, and in order to have that impact, so they should keep that first-hand account, for example, from victims or survivors. And this is also, it's very healthy, because it confirms again objectivity and neutrality. Contextualizing with data, so combining personal stories with the relevant statistics, helps emphasize the scale of the issue. So this is also very important. So you contextualize the data. I told you many times that speaking within a context, it does matter in human rights. This is something very important. Why? Because when contextualizing with the data, so of course we do respect the community specificities, either cultural specificities, sometimes social specificities or particularities, political also particularities. So we should contextualize the issue. We should contextualize with the data. So this is something very important, that in order to reach that impact, in order to have, of course, a tremendous impact on human rights issues and on our communities. Highlighting solutions, so this is also, it alludes us to the will plan. So of course, after narrating, after contextualizing with the data, after analyzing the issue, identifying the issue, and so on and so forth, so you here, it's like you make some recommendations, so you highlight solutions. It means reporting on positive outcomes or efforts toward change, empowers audiences, and supports advocacy for policy reform. So this is something very important. When you highlight solutions, when you end your report with with positive outcomes, positive consequences. Sometimes it's very hard to have positive outcomes, but anyway, so you try to just end with something which is positive, to just keep your community energetic vibes. Okay, this is something very important because the intention behind all these reports, for example, is empowerment. is to empower people, for example, to make them very active in their societies, to identify uprising issues, to talk about debatable, controversial issues, for example, that your community is or is suffering from. So this is the purpose behind those reports, and of course they do matter because it's we cannot do we cannot do without them. So the impact of human rights reporting. So this is it after you finish, for example, your report, or after you write about human rights abuses or either human rights prosperity. Why not? So this is our aim. It's to reach a prosperous world, okay, full of human rights, and also where we can find, where we can enjoy all human rights. So the impact of human rights reporting, policy change. This is something very important. Sometimes a report can make a change. A report, for example, can enable communities, for example, to make legal changes, legal to reform legal, for example, laws and so on and so forth. I think that we saw, if you still remember that video about the two aisles with that development journalism, if you still remember how they made a tremendous progress thanks to this media advocacy and thanks to this to development journalism, and that was very very important. So the two aisles of course progressed at the same time. So if you still remember in what we talked about in our previous lectures, so policy changes, so reports on human rights violations can need two reforms. Why not? To revise the law, sometimes legal revisions, such as changes in immigration policy, new law. If you still remember, we talked about how that immigration law can be revised, for example, thanks to development journalism, thanks to many organizations and government organizations, or new laws protecting women's rights, people with disabilities, vulnerable people in general, marginalized people, or people just in inferior situations. International pressure, so detailed reporting can prompt international sanctions on investigations, as seen in the coverage of human rights abuses, okay, in Myanmar. So this is also something which is very important in concerning the impact of human rights. So in addition to policy change, legal reforms, legal revisions, changes in policies, so this is also can prompt international sanctions, and we did of course see many examples of this international pressure. Policy awareness also and advocacy. By informing the public, human rights journalism empowers communities to advocate for change and support non-profit organizations addressing these issues. So I think that we talked about how there is this collaboration between non-government organization and media advocacy. How development journalism, of course, benefits non-government organizations and vice versa. So this is a reciprocal, of course, help and change. These are some general principles of reporting, and they are also advanced and postulated by the United Nations. If you, for example, consult the website of this organization, so you will find that it tackled also these issues, how the report on human rights should look like. So the first thing is accuracy. So this is something, accuracy, very accurate, very precise, very focused. It should identify one single issue, responsibility and accountability. So those journalists, for example, they should be very responsible for anything, for example, that they say, and for everything that they account. Fairness, so this is establishing, of course, justice. So this is also very important because they defend human rights, they advocate for human rights, so they should begin with themselves in the first instance. So they should be very fair, and they should balance, of course, this fairness. What does it mean? It means that maybe sometimes you find a male journalist portraying about women, so he should be very fair while portraying about women. Okay, the same. It's vice versa. It's the same thing. So again, this question of contextualization with data is very is very important. Objectivity and impartiality. So objectivity is very demanded, it's very needed in reporting on human rights. So those journalists, reporters, for example, so they should be very objective and very neutral. Timeliness and relevance. So any report, for example, on human rights, so it should be very relevant to the space, for example, because it narrates something about a certain space. So we talked about storytelling, how it can be like a sort of storytelling. So it should be very relevant to the particularities of that space, to the particularities of the time. So the setting, it's like the setting of the report should be very, very palpable, and this is something also very, very needed. Well, so as a conclusion, so we I just opt to conclude with this image or picture. So you see this photo, that means that human rights should be tackled with scrutiny and with objectivity. In any report, for example, or all reports on human rights, they should take into consideration that question of objectivity, accuracy. They should be very concise, very relevant, and they should take into consideration the context where, of course, and when they get those information, in order, of course, to preserve human dignity, which is the most important thing in human rights premises. Well, so these are the references of our lecture. So you can consult them later on if you would like to get deeper or delve into the details later on. Thank you very much. Yes, no